Facebook whistleblower Frances Haugen is comparing the social media site to big tobacco companies. She says Facebook, like the tobacco companies, hid the damage their product caused customers. So the question is, should the federal government start regulating companies like Facebook, Twitter, and Snapchat? The best minds in politics are here to talk about the Facebook controversy. George Washington University political science professor Quadricos Driscoll is joined by BNC contributor Amisha Cross and Democrat Tyrone Sims. Good to see all of you this morning. Listen, let's begin with the fact that Senator Amy Klobuchar is expected to question Haugen about the role of Facebook and misinformation. Let's listen to what she had to say.
We talk about vaccine misinformation. We know what that has done. And now we find out that they've been peddling this. So number one, make these algorithms more transparent. Number two, if you're not going to do this kind of stuff, I've said this very clearly, I think you got to start looking at taking away their immunity for certain things that they do.
So the drumbeat of regulating social media companies and big tech is off in the distance, but is gaining some momentum. Quadricos, Facebook and others are communications companies just like those of us here at BNC and CNN. Is it time for the FCC to start regulating them?
Thanks for having me. We're at a point in the moment in our society where if this does not drive Congress to take action, then I wonder severely what will. The choices obviously made by Facebook have been huge problems for children, for public safety, for democracy, and in some ways paraphrasing what Frances Haugen said. How part of this investigation is not just transparency, but part of this investigation is how Facebook has contributed and led ultimately to the downfall of our democracy. How might Facebook have contributed to the January 6th riot at the Capitol, for example? And there is so much misinformation and disinformation out there that it's not necessarily to stop the disinformation, but it is certainly to monitor. And right now that calls for regulation. Even the Federal Trade Commission is making a second opportunity, a second chance to provide to a federal judge about how Facebook has illegally maintained its monopoly for so long. I mean, all of this needs to be in part of the investigation, and it is Congress's job to do that.
It's kind of like the old story of Pandora's box. It's already opened, and the Facebook internal documents showing how its Instagram app led to depression and anxiety amongst teen girls. Amisha, companies have a responsibility to protect their consumers, but what role do parents have in the discussion about social media's effects on their children?
Thanks for the question. I feel like Section 230, which has for the longest provided zero liability for these social media platforms, is very frustrating. I personally side with this being a parental responsibility. Facebook didn't come around until basically I was already at the end of my high school years. But I will say this, I grew up with the influences of people like Britney Spears, Christina Aguilera, and all of the flat-bellied, small girls who had the belly button rings and everything else. I remember girls going to the bathroom, vomiting, doing whatever they could, going on carrot diets, swallowing cotton balls, everything to, be the aesthetic that they saw in magazines and music videos. A lot of that preceded and will proceed after, the era of Facebook is over. I think that we have to give a certain level of credibility to the fact that, our media in general promotes unhealthy body types, promotes body distortion. That has occurred over time, and there are many young girls who are going to consume this, whether they get it from Instagram, Facebook, or someplace else. I don't solely think that is a Facebook issue. What I do think we need to fully concentrate on here and move away from the what about the kids isms that we tend to do a lot is the fact that Facebook contributed heavily to the January 6th insurrection. It contributes heavily to the anti-vax and COVID-19 conspiracy theories. It contributes heavily to a lot of the gang influence and recruitment for gang activity. It contributes heavily to a lot of the downfall, I think, of American society. But I think that we need to focus more heavily on those things, on the things that we see in terms of recruitment of anti-Semitic groups and the spread of anti-Semitism, the spread of hate, the spread and the cohesion of several of these groups together that are anti-Black, that are anti-Muslim. We know that Facebook contributes to those things. When we talk about young women and body image issues, I think a lot of that is going to fall on parents telling their kids, uplifting them, increasing their self-esteem, and recognizing that music, movies, the types of things that they walk out every day and see are going to be influential in how they see themselves. And to combat that, parents have to do their job. I wouldn't say that that is a full-fledged Facebook issue, and I'm quite frankly disturbed that a lot of that conversation is now falling into Facebook's lap when these issues have existed long before Facebook or Instagram ever even became a twinkle in Zuckerberg's eye.
All right, Amisha, thank you for that. That's well stated. As you were talking, we were looking at live images coming from the Senate hearing that we expect Frances Haugen to speak about any minute about Facebook. But Tyrone, let me get to you real quickly. To Amisha's point, the greatness of a nation really begins in the homes of its people. And social media has made the world smaller, but it's still important about what's going on in your home. And we also know that social media has also increased political activism. Does the good Facebook and other social media sites outweigh the damage the media talks about? And again, to Misha's point, shouldn't the home, the parents, have some responsibility in making sure the false narratives that seep through are actually talked about and challenged right there in the home?
Amisha has a very good point. The problem with her point is that she forgets that the home is no longer the safe place anymore. You know, the children all have phones, and even if parents are even more responsible than other parents and those children don't have phones, the modern day classroom, every child now has some type of electronic device, whether it's an iPad, a laptop, in order to do their schoolwork, whether they're the poorest child in their community or the richest child in their community. And so if a child is being bullied, the child can't ever escape, because they're always going to have their device. And so even if their parent takes their own personal phone away from them, they still have to go to their computer and do their schoolwork. And of course, they're going to go up on their social media, because that's what people do, whether you're a child or an adult. And they're going to see the negative, the negative comments that are directed towards them. And so if they had a bad day at school, say back in 1990, when I was in middle school, I could go home and I'd be safe. But now in 2021, if you have a bad day at school, you're going to have a bad day at home as well. And so, yes, the parents do have to be there to uplift and build up their children and instill in them the fact that they are special, that they are unique, that they are great, despite what the world says. But if they can't ever escape from that, that makes their worlds even worse. And that's why we've had these high rates of depression in our young people, and why the suicide rate in our young people is increasing. And so, again, I believe in the sanctity of the family, and that it is the responsibility of the family to ensure that their child feel special and feel loved. But the social media platforms, whether it's Facebook, or I know Facebook owns most of them, but there is a responsibility. If they want to be treated like journalists, right, then they need to be treated like journalists to the full extent of the law. And right now, that is not the case. They want their cake and eat it too, and it's time for them to have to be treated with as responsible as traditional journalists are.
I want to address something.
Jerome, thank you for that.
The argument there that I had was not about cyberbullying. I think that's an entirely different contextual issue, and I do agree with you with those points. The piece that and the framework that I was speaking on was specific to females and body image. That has been something that the majority of women and young girls have been dealing with across this country for a very long time. And the fact that our celebrity culture and the advancement of that celebrity culture has consistently pushed body types that are quite frankly detrimental to women and aren't naturally found outside, but also the ways that people get those body types are also things that are very hurtful to young women, specifically teens, and those who are seeing, these body types be perpetuated. But it's not just a social media issue. They're across magazines, they're across TV, they're across music videos. That is the society we happen to live in. I was not speaking on cyberbullying. I was speaking specifically to the question posed about body image and the fact that that has been a crisis in young America for a very long time, specifically geared towards teen girls.
All right, well, we're going to take a break, and but again, I think this conversation shows just how vast the tentacles of social media is permeating our society, especially among our young people. We'll be back with more in just a moment. And welcome back to The World Tonight. We are following the developments going on in Capitol Hill right now. I just want to point out that the chair of the Subcommittee on Consumer Protection, Product Safety, and Data Security has convened today's hearing that we'll hear from Frances Haugen, who is the Facebook whistleblower. And we were just talking about Facebook and its impact on our society, in particular our young people, young girls, teens, and children. So we've got the best minds in politics who are here to talk about the Facebook controversy and all that's going on. George Washington University political science professor Quadricos Driscoll is joined by BNC contributor Amisha Cross and Democrat Tyrone Sims. So we were talking about how Senator Amy Klobuchar is comparing the vaccination misinformation to the misinformation that comes from Facebook and how it's causing so much heartbreak throughout America. And moments ago, Quadricos, we were listening to Amisha and Tyrone talk about the impact that it's having on women, but then there's also bullying. Talk to us, if you will, Quadricos, about what your concerns are as we watch Senator Blackburn there at today's hearing. What happens here, senators often give their opening statements before they hear from the star witness, and that being Frances Haugen today. But Quadricos, what are your concerns related to the conversation about Facebook, Instagram, and WhatsApp, and how it's hurting so many people in this country?
Right. The conversation a moment ago was really interesting in the sense of cyberbullying versus negative body images and body positivity as it relates to young women and frankly young men as well. I mean, we can't necessarily be completely gendered here.
Good
because
point.
I think young men also have similar images, particularly men who may be dealing with sexual orientation, non-binary, etc., non-gendered, etc. So we also have to include men in this category as well, right? So I think that, and I kind of agree certainly with the perspective, and less with Mr. Brother Sims, in the sense that it fundamentally falls on not just the parents, but it falls on the village. It falls on the village of children to make sure that they are affirmed, that they are loved, that they are protected even against cyberbullying. Listen, I know that children, I'm a professor, obviously I know that children have their mobile devices quite often throughout the day, 24 hours a day. But it's not only incumbent upon parents and their village to monitor how much they're on those devices, but it's incumbent upon parents and, again, the village to give children, students the access, the tools, the resources, even if that is professional help. It is about affirming. It is about ensuring that your child is universally loved and not just coming only and solely from the parental units. Most of this fundamentally, I think, starts at home. The concern and Congress should be focused on with regard to Facebook, I think, as Misha said, with regard to the number of terrorist groups that arise on the platform, the number of hate groups against blackness and brownness that arise on the platform, the number of, again, disinformation about voting, about vaccines, and about health in general. That's the type of information that Congress should be focused on, less of the cyberbullying, less on the issues I feel that need to be more taken care of by the village, and more of the issues that directly impact our society and that have a direct impact on our democracy and our civil society as a whole.
So look, let's keep in mind then, thank you for that, Quadricos. Let's keep in mind that Facebook, the users of Facebook, the 2.7 billion people who are dialing into it every day to check their status, they can also decide to use it for something good rather than using it to promote something bad like misinformation that leads to not understanding what a vaccination really can do in this COVID pandemic, by not putting out information that poses hate rather than lifting up love, freedom, and peace. I mean, I'm on Facebook just about every day promoting positivity. Amisha, in that place, don't we as users of Facebook have the right to countermand all of those things that are going with a negative vibe by putting out our positive input?
We absolutely have the right, and several of us, self-included, do that. We don't follow things that run a narrative that we know is incorrect. We don't promote false information. But with that being said, that is an assumption that everybody who's on Facebook or Instagram or WhatsApp is sharing things that are politically astute, that are honest and are truthful. And we know that that is not the case. What we do know as well is that Facebook makes a ton of money off of misinformation based on the way their algorithms are set up, based on the amount of clicks, shares, and likes that come from information that is quite frankly not backed up by scientific data and is not true. We saw